Hi there, it's Tracy Kiernan, and this acrylic painting is called Puffin Island. I'm going to show you how to paint this with acrylics on an 11 by 14 inch canvas. Let's go over colors, brushes, and materials for this. The nice thing is there's only two brushes that I'll be using, the 3/4 wash and the number 4 round brush. Those are both Princeton Velvet Touch brushes. This tutorial does use a tracer for the puffin, and I have this traceable sized for the 11 by 14 inch canvas that you can just print out on one paper, and you'll need graphite paper to transfer that over, and we'll be doing that later after we paint the background. There are 8 colors for this. Neutral, actually this is blue gray, turquoise blue, titanium white, raw umber, cadmium orange hue, yellow oxide, Mars black, and hooker's green hue. So this neutral gray, or not neutral gray, blue gray does not come in the pack of Liquitex. It actually has to be bought separate. If you don't have the blue gray, you can use the neutral gray, which does come in that pack. I'm going to place the canvas vertically and measure 5.5 inches from the top of the canvas. This is going to be the horizon line in our painting. I'm just going to draw a line, and you don't have to make yours this dark. I'm going to make mine dark so it shows up on the camera. And so everything above that will be sky. The lighthouse is going to be above that. Everything below that is the water and the green and the rocks. And our puffin is going to be mostly below that line. We're going to load our paint palette with blue, gray, and titanium white because there's a lot of detail that's going to go in the puffin. We're going to try our best to really just do simple sky, simple water, simple background so that we can really kind of add detail to our bird. So this sky is very, very basic. It's the blue-gray, and it's just going to blend to a light version of that blue-gray towards the bottom. So I'm going to start with just the blue-gray at the top, and I'm just doing horizontal paint strokes that go all the way across the canvas. I'm going to go down maybe an inch or two and grab my white. I'm going to blend that white. So I'm going to blend that white up into the blue-gray, and it's just going to make this kind of gradient of sort of dark blue-gray to light on the bottom. I'm just going to fill up my sky with this. We don't have to blend colors all the way. If it ends up being streaky, it can. If you want it to be more blended and gradient, you can. But really, we don't have to do a lot to this sky. It's very, very basic. I will say this, we are going to add a lighthouse in the distance, and the area that's kind of on the bottom right here, it's a little too light. I'm actually going to go back and maybe add a little bit more gray, blue-gray in that area, just because when I paint the lighthouse, some of the white stripes, I want those to show up and not disappear into the sky. So I'm just adding a little bit more gray there and blend that up so that I'll have enough contrast later on. Let's load our paint palette with turquoise, and we're going to start painting the water in. So when we paint this in, we want to kind of keep in mind that the lower left part of the canvas is going to be a lot of greenery, some rocks. So a lot of the upper right area is going to be water. So double load your turquoise, or double load your 3/4 flat in turquoise and white, and just let those two colors kind of blend together on the canvas. Let's have our water be a little bit lighter way in the distance. So I'm adding more white way up here. And again, think simple with this. This is still part of the background. We're not detailing this ocean up very much. We're just filling this area in with color. And actually, we can have some fun. Let's use, since I have blue-gray left on my palette, I'm actually mixing a little bit of that blue-gray in with the turquoise, especially towards the bottom of this. It really kind of gives it a different kind of blue in there, different variations of that blue into the ocean. But see how I'm forming this area, and I'm leaving this kind of angled, the lower left kind of angle of this blank. So our cliff is going to be coming down here and scooping down at an angle. So I'm leaving all that blank. Go back and add a little bit more white in the distance, kind of blending that so it's a little bit lighter up here. I'm not over blending that color. It does get a tad bit darker towards the bottom. That's how we can create a little bit of perspective in the ocean. We're not doing detailed waves. We can do some simple waves later, but for now I'm just going to leave it like this. I'm going to rinse my brush off and load my paint palette with Hooker's Green Hue, and that we're going to start defining that kind of green cliffy area that our puffin is going to be on. So rinse the brush, get your green, load that in the green, and let's define this area. So I'm going to start in the upper left, about right here, so maybe a couple inches below the horizon line, maybe 1.5 inches. And you're just going to use the end of the brush to define like a diagonal kind of wavy line. So on the bottom right, there's about 2.5 inches of space on the bottom right. And you're just going to fill this in using the full width of the brush. Just kind of gently do these full width sort of wavy lines that are going in the direction of that cliff hill. You might notice that your turquoise is blending with this, and that's fine as long as it's not blending too much and all turning the same color. It's okay. And we're just going to bring this down all the way to the bottom, and you might notice that there's some color difference because down here we're painting over white canvas, up here we're painting over the turquoise. So to kind of counteract that, I'm going to add a little bit of white to this, kind of blend that in at the top. And also the hill would be kind of lighter in the distance and darker on the bottom. Just big kind of wavy paint strokes to fill that area in. All of our canvas is covered. And if you're working on a stretched canvas, you can take your color and you can paint on the sides. I'm going to load Mars Black onto my paint palette, and without rinsing the brush, I'm just going to add a little bit of black to this green. I don't want it to be too dark, just a little bit, enough to darken that green. So it's going to create a shade of that green because I want the dark part of this land area to be lower and the lighter part to be higher. Just blend that in gently, and you can add more green to that if needed. And we're going to get some more black on our palette because next we will be painting the rocks. So behind this green sort of hilly area, there are some rocks. And to do the rocks, we're going to use the number 4 round brush and start by painting them all black. So there's a little bit of water on my brush and kind of adding water to the Mars Black to kind of loosen that color a little bit. We'll start over here on the upper left, and there's kind of a big rock. It goes up just slightly above the horizon line. So I'm just going to paint a rock shape. We will add highlights to these rocks after we paint them all black. We just want to define the shape of these rocks now. So various sized rocks, some are large, some are smaller, some will be overlapping each other. They're all behind this green, so we want to do our best to make it look like they're kind of peeking up behind the green hill. If we need to go back and kind of redo some of the green over the rocks, we can. Also keep in mind that the puffin is going to take up a large portion of this area, so I'm not going to do too many rocks in the center because I know that's going to be covered up anyway. So I'm going to go maybe down here, but leave the rest of the area blank. So if you want, you can take your template and just kind of envision where the bird's going to be. So it's going to be covering those rocks. I don't need to paint them if that's going to be covered up anyway. So all the rocks are painted black. And we can rinse the brush, and let's grab our blue-gray color. And so you want to kind of make sure you're doing this before the black dries because this is blending wet on wet. And on the left side of each of our rocks, we're just going to highlight it with the blue-gray. So I'm just kind of outlining the left side and sort of dragging my paint color into the rest of the black. So kind of the top, kind of the left side, but leaving the right sides of the rocks and the bottom of the rocks dark and shadowy. So we're kind of working from dark to light here. So just a little bit of outlining and dragging your color. And that is giving our rock some highlight, and they all can be different. Just dragging that down and leaving the bottom part dark. I'm do it to this rock, so just kind of the top part, side, dragging it down at an angle, leaving the rest dark. Here, top, dragging down at an angle, leaving the bottom part dark. So then we can take this a step further. I'm going to wipe my brush off, but not rinse, and grab titanium white. So wipe the brush off, grab your white, and wipe it off with the towel a little bit more. Grab the white and kind of do the same thing, but we're not going to cover all that gray. I'm adding less white, just little bits, just to get the sides, tops of the rocks to be a little bit lighter. And it is blending with what I have there because it's wet on wet. So kind of highlight the top, sides, and dragging it down. Maybe some of the areas we see a little few kind of lighter spots. So the top part, a little bit on the top part, and drag it down. Little tiny strokes that you're doing. You're not doing big paint strokes. A little bit of white on top of this one. I'm going to drag it down. And there's another smaller rock in front of it. Kind of the point is we don't want to, there's still that first layer of black. I still see that first layer of black. I didn't cover all of the black. Didn't cover all of the second layer of gray, and there's less white. I can keep going in there and just kind of adding more white in there. We don't want to overdo it because if we keep adding, we may end up just mixing all those colors together. Just a little bit more blue-gray in some of these areas, in these small sort of like pebbled shapes. Next, we are going to paint the lighthouse that's way in the distance, that's kind of right there hanging out on the horizon line. So and you want to make sure the sky is dry for this to work. I'm going to use the foreground in titanium white, and I'm just going to use the white to just kind of draw out the lighthouse shape. So I have these two kind of angled lines that are, it's wide on the bottom and then it goes narrow towards the top. My lighthouse, the height of it is only 1 3/4 inches. So you want to you don't want it to be too big. And so there's the tower. And this is just titanium white. It should be showing up, especially since we went back and added more gray to the sky with the intention of this showing up. So this is the top part of the lighthouse. We did just this basic kind of curved line for the watch part of the tower. And then we can do the light box and a little triangle on top of that. Go up the little point on top of the triangle on the roof. And then we don't have to wait for this to dry to add the black stripes, although if it is kind of saturated, you may, like if you're doing this black and it's blending with the white, you may have to let it dry a little bit and then come back. I'm going to take the black and I'm actually going to curve down for the first stripe. And that's kind of overlapping that ocean area a little bit, and then curve it up. So we curve down and then curve up, and then this one is going to be curving this way, curving kind of downwards. And the watchtower area, I'm going to curve that down. keep in mind this is a far away structure. Since it's in the distance, it can be a little bit more abstract and not super detailed. I'm going to fill in the box black. And then let's do some windows over here on the left. So using the black, just do a little tiny mark for the windows. And we can also bring this down just a little bit further. I'm actually gonna outline the lighthouse a little bit. So I'm wiping off some of the paint and kind of twisting my brush because I'm gonna do a very thin line over here on the right. So I outline that entire right side, outline the little triangle on top. And then I'm going to do some greenery. So without rinsing the brush, grab your Hooker's Green Hue, and we're just going to dab this little islandy area. So I'm just doing little dots of green paint. And we can add a little bit of white in there to kind of highlight it. Go back, maybe add a little bit more dark. So our lighthouse is not just floating in the water. It has some land. And this greenery extends all the way to the left and kind of disappears behind that rock. I'm going to rinse the brush and grab some white. I'm going to do a little bit of highlighting. So white on the brush, and on the right side, I'm just going to kind of outline the right side, but then drag some of that white over on the right side, or the left side, sorry, the left side of the black stripes. And then I'm going to take the white and drag this down. Very, very thin layer of white right there. And that creates a little bit of reflection in the water. I just drag that white down into the water. We don't have to do the black stripes for the reflection, just a little bit of that. And you'll need to wait for everything to dry before going on to this next step. This is kind of part 2 of our painting. We have the background all done, and now we are going to get our puffin into our picture. So I have a template for the 11 by 14 size. If you're part of the membership program, I have these resized for you already to 5 different canvas sizes. If you're purchasing this tutorial as like a download, you can gain access to all the traceable sizes for that. And then I have the 11 by 14 this size for free if you're watching this on YouTube. So that traceable is linked in this video. And so what I'm doing here is placing, so my graphite paper is shiny side down, and I want to kind of place the puffin. So your puffin actually might be placed differently. It depends on your lighthouse and your rock formation. So you want to place him the right side of the canvas. You want to make sure his feet are in an appropriate spot of the green area so he's not floating in the air, but he's pretty lower down in the green area. In fact, I measured it, so 1.5 inches from the bottom edge of the canvas is where the bottom part of his foot is, and then on the right side, his foot is about 2.5 inches from the right side. So the foot that's more towards the right, his left foot, but it's 2.5 inches from the right edge of the canvas. So if you like those measurements and you want to make sure you're placing him correctly, but like I said, yours might be different depending on your rocks and your lighthouse. So once I figure that out, I'm just going to hold this. Sometimes it helps to tape it so you can make sure it's held in place. And you're just basically going to trace, and you press firmly on all of your lines. You're tracing flat on the canvas. The canvas is flat on the table. It's not easy to do this if it's propped on an easel, so you want to make sure it's flat, you're pressing firmly, and you'll be able to see your lines. What some people like to do is actually trace this first before background. Like if you're doing a paint party or just want to make it easier for yourself, some people like to trace first and then outline everything with the Sharpie and that will show through the first layer of paint. I'm not sure about the dark green area if it'll show, but a lot of times like the lighter, it would definitely show through the sky and the water area, and maybe the green. But you can do that, or you can even trace what you just drew with a Sharpie again. If you really like to see those bold lines and that's helpful, you can. So I'm using the black, and I'm starting at the top. I'm just doing this area of black on the top of his head, and you can see how it goes to like a slither kind of point over here on the right. Actually, it's going to wrap around its entire head, but it's wider up towards the beak, and it gets very narrow as it goes to the back of the head. So only little bits of black on my brush at a time. It's helpful if you add just a teeny bit of water into that black. It helps with the flow of the paint, and you can really get in there and do that fine detail work. I'm only using the very end of the paintbrush to do this. And then under this part is also black, so I'm going in curved direction and over here around his side wing and above the belly. So outlining the area that you're filling in and then painting your paint strokes in a curved direction in the shape. So curved strokes where there's a curve. So this part's curving and it's attaching to the side, to the top of the head, and as you're filling it in, you're filling it in the direction of the shape. Solid black right now, we're not doing any highlighting, although we will start introducing blue-gray. So I have black and blue-gray on my brush, and I'm going to paint this wing. So notice the wing is like a teardrop shape, and I want that to stand out, so I'm making this a different kind of black. It's still dark, but it's black mixed with blue-gray, so it's kind of like a different kind of black. And as I'm filling this in, I'm double loading my brush in black and blue-gray. I'm doing big paint strokes that are curving, so kind of outlining the shape of that teardrop. And then filling it in with paint strokes that kind of gently blend. Right here, this is the top part of the wing, and I'm adding white right there because I want that to stand out from the side of his neck, back area. So adding that white in there adds a little bit of contrast so that stands out. And you're just big curved strokes to kind of gently blend that blue, gray, and black with that teardrop shape. Back a little bit more white on my brush right here. That's going to stand out. And then we have kind of this segmented area down here for his tail feathers. And this, I'm going to have it be more blue-gray than black, just so that can stand out a little bit better. So I did it with blue-gray. And then down here, blue, gray, and white. So now it's a shade lighter. So we have 3 different kinds of tiers there. We have the side wing and then the 2 different tail feathers. All different kinds of shades of gray so that they stand out from each other. I'm going to do some texturing on his side wing, so load the brush in some blue-gray so that this is going to show up lighter than that black layer. So that teardrop big side wing, I'm going to go back and just add these kind of diagonal paint strokes with this gray, and it's going to show up doing like little feather textures, so it's just little dashed strokes. And these might be blending with the black, and that's okay. Next, I'm going to rinse the brush and start doing the white parts of the puffin. So get some fresh titanium white on the palette. We'll still be using the number 4 round brush. In fact, we'll be using this brush for the rest of the painting. And let's start filling in the belly area. So belly area, we want to just start by at the top and do big curved strokes that go in the direction of that shape and just sort of outline that shape to get that defined. Big kind of thick paint strokes. You want to make sure that this is covering the, like right here, it is covering that rock and having to paint over a rock here, but we don't want to see the rock through the bird. So for the most part, this Liquitex titanium white is very opaque. If you're using a different brand, it may not be as opaque and you may have to go over it with a second or even a third coat of paint to get that coverage. So right now I'm only using white. I'm not grabbing any other colors. But my paint stroke direction is already starting to create some feather texture just because I'm going in these kind of like short curved directions. Down here where the legs are, I'm just going to drag this paint down and kind of let it kind of fray out at the bottom. So maybe go to a point a little bit, almost dry brush style. So you're kind of dragging your brush down and sort of just kind of letting go of the brush. It gives it that kind of dry end to it, gives it some of that feathered texture look. And we're just filling in the rest of this with white just under his wing and around his back tail feathers. Little bits of white that curve around. And we're going to start doing some darker color in here just to get that texture and color variation. Although if you're simplifying this painting, you can definitely just leave this white and you don't have to render this any further. I'm going to grab my blue-gray without rinsing the brush. I'm just going to be very careful. I'm going to make sure that this isn't too dark. If it's too dark, I need to add more white or kind of wipe the brush off. But I'm just doing these kind of curved paint strokes that are going in the direction of that shape. The belly is curving this way. So these little feathers are curving this way. Again, this should not be very dark at all, just little tiny bits. The end of my paintbrush, I'm just barely letting that touch the surface of the canvas. So very gentle paint strokes. Grab some more white before this gets too dark. A little bit more white, kind of going back over what I just painted. It's actually kind of letting that blend a little bit. Little curved, short paint strokes. I'm going to take his side wing. I'm going to just grab some black here without rinsing the brush, although I may have to wipe the brush off here because it's overloaded. But I'm taking this wing and making sure that this overlaps that white part. So that part is in front, so I'm just redefining that kind of curved shape. And I'm going to add a bit of highlight to the left part of his neck. So wipe the brush off and grab just a teeny bit of white on there. And down here, just above that wing, just little tiny kind of curved strokes in that area, but still not losing the shape of the wing. I can still very distinctly see the end curve, that top part of his wing. I'm going to rinse the brush off and back to pure white. Let's start filling in the side of his head. Big white circle. As I'm filling this in, I am going to go around the beak, the end of the beak shape. I'm going to go around his eye, and then there's like a little yellow kind of oval shape on the right side of the beak. I want to leave that shape blank too, so I'm going to go around that as well. So as you're filling this in, we want to just kind of do the curved direction thing. So I went around the eye. The eye is like a teardrop shape, and I curved my strokes around that. I don't want to lose the shape of the eye, and I'm just filling in this circle solid. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of gray in the face area. So I'm going to take my brush and not rinse the white off the brush and grab some of the blue-gray color. And so this is just white with a little bit of blue-gray on the brush. So it shouldn't be too dark, just a couple shades darker than that white. And I take this and kind of blend it wet on wet around some of the edges of the face, the round white part of the face, just on the edges, and just kind of blend it in the center. I want to make sure the center of that just stays kind of bright and white, and it's just a little bit of gray along the outer part of the circle. And I'm taking more titanium white right here. So there's a cheek like that's right below the eye, or just kind of a rounded area, and that needs to stay white, but I'm going in here and just kind of making it more circular and blending that back in. Next, I'm going to load Cadmium Orange Hue onto my paint palette, and we're going to start painting the beak of the puffin. So make sure you rinse your number 4 round brush off all the way, and let's start by painting the far kind of left part of the beak. So just kind of slowly start filling it in. You can kind of just outline the shape, fill it in kind of curved paint strokes that go in the direction of the shape. There's this bottom piece that's also orange, but I left the far right part of it blank. You can tell by the finished picture that that's kind of a different color. It has kind of a beige and brown color, a little bit of turquoise too in that area. And I'm also going to paint the outer part of the eye. So the outer part of the eye is orange. So the eye is kind of like a teardrop shape. This is actually the outer marking of the eye, and I'm leaving the circle blank. So all this part is orange, circle stays blank. And next we're going to start painting his feet in. So still load your brush in the orange and just kind of slowly start painting this. And you're going to notice the orange is a little translucent over this dark green area. So go ahead and double load your brush in orange and white. And the white is going to lighten that color, but it's going to allow it to show up against the dark green on the grass. So you're just kind of outlining the shape, kind of make it more like an abstract shape. You don't have to make it super realistic. So do the leg, and then outline the shape of the bottom part of his foot. It kind of webs out a little bit, but you're just kind of outlining the shape of it and then filling it in. Again, adding little bits of white in there will help lighten that color. And we can always, if we want it to be more orange, we can always wait for that to dry and then go back with a layer of orange. But for now, I'm just going to fill that in. I'm going to let that dry before I detail his feet any further. Load your paint palette with yellow oxide, and we're going to add more color to the puffin's beak. And we're going to add this to the right side where we kind of left it blank. So this is yellow oxide, and we'll use a clean number 4 round brush. Load that into the yellow. And there's this kind of border on this kind of crescent shape over here. So I'm going to just outline this part. So this is just yellow oxide, and I'm taking this, and there's like an outline right here that outlines the outer part of that shape of the beak. And I'm going to leave the center of that blank because that's going to have brown and a little bit of teal in it later. There's on his cheek, there's like a roundish circle like right here. Double load your brush in white and yellow oxide and just paint this sort of like circle shape in that area. And this is going over that white part of his head. And then on the left part of his beak, I'm just going to take this yellow oxide. And so the orange isn't dry and it's blending a little bit, but that's okay. I'm just going to do these curved paint strokes that go from the top of the beak down to the bottom. And just 3, it blends with the orange a little bit, and I'm leaving the outer part of that orange, and it should be orange in between these lines. So I actually grabbed more orange on my brush and did orange in between those lines. It ended up blending a little bit too much, but that's okay. We have that kind of pretty color variation in the beak. We have these kind of stripy things with the yellow. Next, I am going to paint the eye and the rest of the beak. So this is the color Raw Umber that I'm loading onto my paint palette. And we're going to use a clean and rinsed number 4 round brush. Let's take our brown, and we are going to paint a circle in his eye. So there is a circle that's still there. We left a circle blank. And actually, let's add a little bit of white to this brown because it's such a dark brown. And I want the black part, the pupil of the eye, to show up. So that'll show up better if this was a lighter brown. So just quickly mix a little bit of white into that and then kind of form your circle shape with that brown. And we're going to kind of let that be for a little bit before we do anything else to the eye. And then let's take our light brown color. So again, this is brown mixed with white. And inside of the beak, we have this kind of crescent shape that's still blank. We're just going to fill the rest of that in and leave so this shape right here, the outer border of that is the yellow oxide. And if we need to, we can go back and touch that up later. That yellow oxide, we can kind of re-outline that area. And I'm adding just a touch more dark brown right in the center of this part of the beak. So that part is really dark. When this dries much later in the painting, I'm just going to I'll add like a little bit of turquoise in there, but this needs to dry before I can do that. I'm going to do some more detail work on the eye next, and we want to have a clean rinsed number 4 round brush, and we'll be needing the color Mars Black. So if you look at the finished version of this, there's some black markings on the eye that are kind of around the orange area. So I'm going to take my black, and we can kind of loosen that black and kind of twist the brush to make sure that we can do this detail work. But on the very top point of that kind of orange area, I did like a black tip at the top, and it kind of meets the top part of his head. And then below we have this kind of curve under the orange part of the eye, and it makes a curve kind of in a circle, it makes it look like he has that side sort of cheek with the black curved line. And then I rinsed my brush, and I'm going to take this orange again and kind of touch up the orange. So right here, this piece of the orange goes almost all around that circle, but it kind of stops on the far left part of that circle. I'm going to rinse and grab my brown again, and I'm going to touch up the actual circle part of the eye. So this needs to be circular. And I'm going to add just a little bit more white in that brown again to lighten that brown up. So just a teeny tiny bit of white is all we need on the brush. And then I'm going to take that, mix that in with the brown. So he's got kind of a medium brown color. And this is, again, just to make sure the black part of the eye is going to show up later on. And that is it for the eye. We're going to let that dry before we do any more details to it. I'm going to rinse a number 4 round brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of yellow oxide towards the bottom area, kind of above his feet in the white part of his like belly leg area. And so this is a clean rinsed number 4 round brush. I'm going to double load it in yellow oxide and white. I'm just going to go in there and just add a few more kind of feather style paint strokes, just very, very light kind of curved brushes. You're just barely letting that brush touch the brush or touch the canvas. That creates these very light sort of feathered paint strokes. This just adds a little bit of color variation down here. You can actually not do this if you don't want to add yellow in this area. Just a few more kind of down here. Again, just for color variation. Gives it some more texture. And next I'm going to start adding more detail to his legs and feet. So I didn't rinse my brush for this, and that's fine. So we want just the orange, and we want to kind of darken this because we added that light layer first so that we can get coverage over the dark green. So now I'm going back over it with a darker layer of orange. So I did the leg, and I'm just slowly going down to his feet. I'm just going to do these 3 lines. So there's the second one. See how they're kind of going diagonal? And then the third one right here. That's going to start forming his kind of webbed foot look. And I can do the 2 little curved lines. And we still see the outer part from that first shape we did, but that's okay. So now we have kind of more of his shape. I'm going to grab the white and do white over those 3 lines that I just did to lighten those lines to kind of gives it a little bit more 3-dimensional. I'm going to do the same thing right here. So I'm going to go back over this shape with this orange to make it darker, 3 diagonal lines, and then curve to kind of give him that webbed foot look. Go back with the white, go back and redo those 3 diagonal lines. So again, if you want to simplify this and just paint it solid without the highlighting you can do that. You can even paint later on grass to kind of disguise his foot. So maybe his feet are kind of nestled in the grass and that's kind of hiding that. Because the feet are a little bit of a challenge. I'm going to rinse my brush and grab the black, and I'm going to do 3 little claws. So they're like little curved lines that go to a point that start at the foot and then just curve outwards and go down. So to get that point, you just kind of release the pressure of your brush. So a little bit more pressure at first, let go, and just very, very lightly make that little point. Right here, I have orange and black on my brush. So this is a shade of orange. I'm shading this. So I just added teeny bits of black and orange. And on the left part, I'm just kind of darkening the edge on the left part of the leg and then kind of the bottom part of his foot for a little bit of shadowing. Next, I am going to go back and work a little bit more on the detail of his beak. So I'm going to rinse my brush off and I'm going to go back and use my yellow oxide and white. That white is going to brighten that yellow oxide and kind of make it show up better and brighter. But I want to do this very distinct sort of outline around the dark part, that dark kind of crescent part of the beak. So I just went and re-outlined that shape. Rinse your brush and go and grab your little bit of black. We're going to do that black sort of division line that kind of divides the top part of his beak from the bottom. And so my orange is still a little bit wet. So if it's smearing too much, see how it kind of smeared a little bit? You may have to wait for that to dry just a little bit more to get more of a distinct black line in there. But it's a very, very thin line that divides the top and the bottom. And then do a little bit of outlining on the very bottom of the beak. So take that black and outline right here, very, very thin, loose line. And then I take that, curve it just a little bit on the right. I'm not going to outline the top part of the beak. I'll leave that the way it is. Then I'm going to do some optional detail work on this part, the side wing. So without rinsing the brush, I grabbed a little bit of white and I'm just going to add a little bit more texture in here. I don't want to add too much white in this area because it should be very distinctly a black part of the wing, but a little bit of light color in there gives us that feather texture on the side of the wing, makes some really pretty color variation. So these are very loose kind of white lines. Down here, I went back and kind of darkened that bottom part of the wing to make sure that that is dark and outlined on that area. I'm also going to take my black and just kind of do a few touch-ups on the neck and head area. So with the black, so up here, kind of touching that shape up right here, make sure that that is all nice and defined. I'm going to rinse and I'm going to do on the left part of his wing, just a white, sort of very, very thin outline to give that part just a little bit more contrast. So this is very, very thin, loose outline, a little bit on the left part of the neck. And then I'm going to add a few more kind of feathered paint strokes with the black. So we don't have to rinse the brush, so just a little bit of black down here. And by his tail feathers, just kind of like these zigzag paint strokes. And next, I am going to move along to the grass portion of this. So you can decide if you want to not do the grass. You don't have to do grass texture. You can do just a little bit of grass texture kind of here and there, or you can fill it up and go crazy with the grass texture. So I'm starting with just yellow oxide on the end of my number 4 round brush. I'm doing these very kind of thin, and we can even play around with the colors. So this is brown and yellow oxide. So very thin, kind of tall grass lines that are overlapping some of these rocks over here. And you're just using the tip of the paintbrush very lightly, creating like a cluster of grass. And then over here on the left, same thing. I'm going to start introducing green into this as well. So you can make your grass overlap his feet to kind of make him look like he's kind of nestled into the grass area, or you can use that as an opportunity to kind of disguise the feet if you don't like the way the feet look. So I'm going to do some more grass back here, kind of make it overlap some of the rocks, and you're just kind of loading your brush in different amounts of yellow oxide, green, brown. You can even utilize the white for that, kind of all throughout the landscape. So the grass that kind of closer to the bottom could be a little bit thicker and taller. So like right here, doing little pieces that kind of overlap bottom of his foot. And again, you decide how much or how little of this texture. I'm going to make some of the pieces, or a lot of the pieces that are closer to the bottom, those are thicker, longer. That gives us a little bit of perspective. And I am going to go silent here for a little bit while I just fill up this whole green area with a lot of grass texture. One tip really quick is add just a little bit of water to the brush. That kind of thins it down. Also makes it easier to control your thin grass blade lines. Over here in the lower left, I'm actually doing these a little bit darker, so a little bit of black and green kind of mixed together. I am going to finish the detail work in the eye, specifically painting the black circle, the pupil part, and the little white dot for the highlights. So make sure that this is completely dry before doing this, and then paint a very solid black smaller circle inside of the brown circle. And then rinse your brush and You can either wait for the black to dry or you can do this now. It just kind of depends on how saturated this is. I'm going to get some fresh titanium white and do one little white dot in the upper right part of the circle. So that gives them a little highlight. And then I'm going to grab that yellow oxide. So remember this yellow kind of circle right here? I'm going to make that a little bit more exaggerated. So I just went over that and made it a little bit bigger in a second coat of paint. The rest of this painting really is final touch-ups, and we'll be doing some optional little white flowers in the grass area. But what I am going to do here is add a few white lines in the ocean area. We didn't really detail the ocean up a lot, and that was just because there's a lot of detail work in the puffin, and we didn't really need to do a lot with this background. But I'm doing just a few kind of loose white lines. So the lines that are further away are smaller, thinner, closer together, and maybe just a few kind of thicker lines towards the bottom. You really don't need to do much detail, realistic stuff with that. And then I really like how these white flowers look. It just adds a fun kind of element to the bottom of the painting, where it's kind of dark and a lot of green going on, but just these little daisy flowers. And these are just simple white petaled flowers. I'm just doing like little 5 petals, and they're kind of going at different angles. So imagine like the flower, maybe we're viewing it partly from the side or 3/4 view, or some of them might be the frontal view. And you can do as many or as little as you want. You can even do like little dots kind of way back here. Maybe those are smaller flowers that haven't bloomed yet, or they're just far away. While these flowers are drying, I'm going to actually go back to the top part of his beak and just highlight this a little bit. So I outline the top of the beak, and I'm just dragging my brush down a little bit. This is just the top. And then a little bit of highlight on the top of his head and that black area and the left part of his neck. Very, very lightly, almost kind of dry brush style, just with the titanium white. And now that the flowers are dried, or for the most part have given time to dry, so we're going to load, I'm going to do the center part of the flower. So this is yellow oxide that I loaded on my palette. I'm just taking my round brush and I'm doing little yellow circles in the center of all the flowers. Some of the circles might be towards the top because the flower is kind of turned a little bit. And I can also maybe touch up some of the petals or do more flowers if I want. We don't really have to do stems for these flowers just because it's kind of implied that the grass area there's already stems. But if you want to, you can kind of get a darker color or even a lighter color and just go back and do a little line down for the stems. And I'm gonna do just a few more. I like these little white dots. Helps to kind of balance out the painting. Do maybe another flower down here. The final thing I'm going to do is add just a pop of turquoise on the beak. So right over here on the brown, I'm just going to do a really small kind of curved stroke on the top and the bottom with the turquoise. It just adds a really pretty pop of color right there. And that is it. This is the conclusion of how to paint Puffin Island. Hope you enjoyed this one. Thanks for watching, and thanks for painting with me.